listener production.
Hello, happy Friday and welcome to The Briefing. I'm Sasha Barbagat. Have you heard of Bonnie Blue? She's an OnlyFans creator who is causing a stir on the Gold Coast with her plan to have sex with as many 18-year-old boys as possible during Schoolies.
I'm not a predator. That's something that's not legal. Everything I'm doing is legal. So spend 5 minutes educating yourself.
People are reacting furiously to her online, and a petition has started to have the 25-year-old UK native kicked out of Australia. So what does she think of all the hate? We speak to Bonnie Blue in the second half of this episode to find out. First, though, it's time for the headlines with Chris Spiru on Friday, November 8.
Morning, Sash. Morning, everybody. We start in the US today, where President Joe Biden has addressed the nation for the first time since Donald Trump's historic win. Biden, who has just 74 days left in the Oval Office, spoke from the Rose Garden at the White House.
We accept the choice the country made. I've said many times, you can't love your country only when you win. You can't love your neighbor only when you agree. Something I hope we can do, no matter who you voted for, is see each other not as adversaries, but as fellow Americans. Bring down the temperature.
Yeah, which is a stark contrast to, comments that Donald Trump made in 2020 after his election loss. Interestingly, Biden did defend the US economy in this speech. He said it's the strongest in the world and that his administration had passed legislation that will see results coming through in the next decades. And we know, Sash, that the economy was a huge sticking point in this election and ultimately the reason that, the Democrats lost. He says he's spoken to Trump as well to congratulate him on the win, assuring a peaceful and cooperative transfer of power. He's also spoken to Democratic nominee Kamala Harris, and he referred to her in the speech as a partner, praising her character and inspiring campaign. The Vice President offered her concession speech yesterday.
While I concede this election, I do not concede the fight that fueled this campaign.
Yeah, I heard her speech described as part rallying cry, part pep talk, which surprised me. I expected her to come out quite sad and despondent, but she was, she was very much prepared to rally her supporters to continue pushing for what they believe in, which is, in quite opposite contrast to what Donald Trump offers. Former PM Kevin Rudd, he's Australia's ambassador to the US. He has tried to quietly delete a tweet from 2020 in which he slammed Donald Trump. In it, he called him, quote, the most destructive president in history, saying that he thrives on division. Rudd has also previously referred to the president-elect as a political liability and a traitor to the West. Now, Rudd's office has released a statement saying he removed the old comments out of respect for the office of the President of the United States and also to eliminate the possibility that these comments could be misconstrued as reflecting his positions as ambassador and by extension the views of the Australian government. So he's in that position where he has to clarify that. It's just like Albo's comments that came out from 2017 where he said he's scared of Trump, and, Peter Dutton has seized on that, saying, well, we shouldn't have a prime minister who's scared of a fellow world leader. So, all these old comments coming out to bite current leaders. And look, in terms of the election, something that's worth updating our listeners on is that the House of Representatives in the US still is not called. So the Republicans won back control of the Senate. They currently control the House of Reps, but it's yet to be called for either party since the election. Now, why that is important is that if the Republicans control both the House of Reps and the Senate, they are essentially going to have a very, very easy time putting through any legislation that they want. It makes it very simple. And if that happens, it'd be the first time in 8 years that they'd have control of both. So that one is worth watching. And look as well, if you kind of want to have a little bit more analysis and you haven't had a chance to listen to yesterday's deep dive with Malcolm Turnbull yet, it's in our feed now. Highly recommend. Remember that massive Optus outage last year? Well, the telco has just been forced to pay a $12 million fine over it. A year ago today, a routine software upgrade to Optus's mobile network saw its entire service brought down for 14 hours, and that impacted 10 million customers across the country. The Australian Media and Communications Authority has confirmed it handed the provider a $12 million fine over its failure to ensure its customers could still call 000. So what usually happens is if there's an outage, a telco can hand over emergency calls coming through to another network to ensure that people who are calling 000 are still having that answered. But the ACMA found Optus breached regulations by failing to do that and also failing to conduct welfare checks on the people who tried to call police, ambos or fireys while the service was down. The ACMA has also found the outage was preventable. And we have heard from Optus, a spokesperson saying that the company knows it let its customers down and it's committed to addressing all lessons from the outage.
Kids under 16 will soon be banned from social media if Anthony Albanese gets his way. But there are still questions about how it'll all be enforced. So the PM yesterday announced his long-awaited plan to keep children off apps like Instagram, TikTok and YouTube in a bid to protect them from things like bullying, porn and inappropriate content.
This one's for the mums and dads. Social media is doing harm to our kids, and I'm calling time on it.
Yeah, I love that he's out there calling time on social media and kids. Today, Albanese will sit down with leaders of the states and territories to put his ideas to them. He wants it to be an approach adopted across the country. And if it gets the nod, we can expect the legislation to be introduced quite quickly, possibly by the end of the year. But a trial to determine how social media companies will keep kids off their platforms is yet to even start. And Albo couldn't even answer questions yesterday about how he'd force them to participate or how he'd even enforce the ban.
Yeah, so a couple of ideas were floated at the press conference, the idea of using facial recognition or even having this government database that verified users' ages that the platforms could then access to confirm that someone was underage or of age. They were floated as ideas, but nothing's locked in yet. And it's worth noting there wouldn't be any penalties for users who managed to access social media under the age of 16 or their parents. However, there would be penalties for platforms that did not heed the new laws. I guess the question with this is, what incentive do the social media companies have to spend all this money and all this time implementing systems to verify users' age? Now, they do say they're serious on age and strict on age, but at the end of the day, they don't care. They just want users. We know by what happens on social media and how awful it is and how they go, yeah, we're doing stuff about it. But we do know that they take a pretty lax approach.
Yeah, I mean, when I was first getting onto social media, Facebook, the minimum age was 13 apparently. I mean, my date of birth was 1990 for the longest time. I'm not born in 1990, but that was the age I always put. It's very easy to skirt the current restrictions, and I can imagine whatever they roll out in the future, that's also going to be something that would be relatively easy for kids to outsmart.
Yeah, we'll see. And Albo has said it's not they know people are going to get through the cracks. It's not going to be no one will ever be able to access social media under the age of 16. I do want to point out this does have bipartisan support, at least the idea of a minimum age for social media. When it comes to the experts and how they feel about it, they're kind of split. Some say this isn't going to work. In fact, it'll probably fail. And some support it. So it's an idea. We'll see what happens.
It's not easy being green.
And if you're wondering what those noises are, those were at the persistence of Sacha Barbara Gadd, who sits opposite me. And look, if you've got nothing better to do over the next few days, why not get out there and count some frogs? Australia's biggest count of the creatures is getting underway today, called Frog ID Week, and people right across the country are being encouraged to register recordings of the critters with the Australian Museum. Now in its 7th year, the data provided during Frog ID Week will show a snapshot of how frogs are faring across the country, which I know you are very excited about, Sacha Barbara Gadd.
It's very important work. And how does this work? How can you get involved? Well, there's an app you can download and use it to record the calls of frogs in your neck of the woods. And I want to point out, you don't need to live in the bush or in the outback to get involved. Plenty of the amphibians can be found in the suburbs and even around some of our major cities. I, for one, live in an area where the frogs are rampant. I live near wetlands, so it's very popular with froggies. I'm actually going to download the app and Guys, I'm pregnant, not going out on Saturday nights. I'm going to go out and record some frogs this weekend. I want to point out, frogs are really cool and they're all over Australia. We have 250 frog species, but 1 in 5 are threatened and we don't know much about them because they are so elusive. So work like this is really important and we can all get involved.
Yeah, I love it so much. And I don't live near wetlands, but we happen to have frogs arrive often in the backyard. And me and my neighbours were actually really quite close-knit because we're all kind of the same age and people freak out. They're like, how are you friends with your neighbours? Anyway, the story has a purpose. I know you're looking baffled. There is a love triangle with the frogs in my area. We have Henry, Rosanna, and the other one, I forget her name. But the three of them, they stand in a literal triangle, staring each other off of an evening and just frequently doing...
Can you please record them?
I actually do. I have to go back and find this photo. I'll pop it up on the briefing podcast if I find it.
Yeah, sure. One for the frog love triangles everywhere. We love it. Chris, thanks so much for being here for the headlines. Next up, we are chatting with Bonnie Blue. She's an OnlyFans creator and people want to kick her out of Australia. Find out why.
Hey, it's Helen Smith here with the briefing. Just a heads up that the following chat discusses themes of sexual assault and minors. Bonnie Blue is a 25-year-old OnlyFans creator that seeks to have sex with and film quote-unquote barely legal young men.
Okay, so Schoolies starts in 4 weeks and I cannot wait to be back on the Gold Coast pleasuring barely legal 18-year-olds.
The adult content creator has caused massive controversy over her plans to attend Schoolies on the Gold Coast this year. While there, she will invite young men to engage in sex with her for free. The exchange is filmed for her OnlyFans content, and Bonnie stresses that those involved must be over the age of 18, have an ID with them, sign 2 consent forms, and take a breathalyser test. Bonnie Blue's intentions to profit on having sex with young men has sparked a serious and complex debate about consent. Where do you draw the line on sex as exploitation when it's done by 2 consenting adults? Is following the legal line the best measure, or is it more complicated than that? And what does Bonnie Blue have to say to those calling her a predator? The briefing invites you to listen to Bonnie Blue's own justifications, as well as a key child sexual assault survivor and activist on why he thinks her behaviour is exploitative. You can listen to him in part 2 of this chat, dropping in your feed soon. Bonnie Blue, thanks for joining us on the briefing. To anyone who doesn't know you, can you tell us who you are and why you're going to Schoolies?
Yes, so I'm Bonnie Blue. I'm an adult content creator and I'm attending Schoolies to sleep and film content with 18-year-olds.
Now, this isn't the first time you've done this. You've travelled to other countries making this type of content.
Yes.
What's the response been in those places?
Well, from the college students and 18-year-olds themselves, they absolutely love it. However, from the parents, it's a slightly different opinion. It's a very negative, well, they try and shame it and they try and make out as if it's something that shouldn't be happening.
Why do you think the parents and the colleges might have that response?
I think from a parent's point of view, they see their son always as this really innocent person that, perhaps doesn't even have intercourse or doesn't drink or get up to mischief. So the idea of their son, having sex, especially being filmed, they see it as, massively taboo and that they don't want, their son going near it. Also, it's because the older generation are very uneducated on the sex industry.
Why do you think that this trip in Australia and all the Schoolies chat has been getting so much attention?
Because they're 18. And I am aware that some of the people that go to Schoolies are 17. However, they are not the ones I'm filming content with. And these people that are giving me hate and trying to cause this drama are misinformed. They're saying, okay, Bonnie is doing something wrong because she's sleeping with people underage. She's sleeping with people that are not consenting. Whereas if they was to spend 5 minutes educating themselves, they'd realise, okay, she makes them fill in consent forms. They have to do a breathalyser test and they do consent. Whereas they're just so narrow-minded on thinking, she's sleeping with people underage, she's a predator, she's a criminal. However, that is not the case and never has been.
Touching on that issue of consent, how do you ensure that the men that are participating are consenting to being part or being filmed or consenting?
Of course. So obviously, as soon as someone contacts me or they're queuing up outside, they're fully aware it's going to be filmed. And the process starts, whether they've been queuing downstairs for multiple hours, they come upstairs, they have to have ID with them and then they have to fill in 2 consent forms. One form which mentions drinking and alcohol and confirming that the ID they have brought with them is themselves. And the other form they sign is an OnlyFans release form, which explains where the content is going to be, the fact I have the rights to the content and they're agreeing for me to film the footage, and the fact they've not been forced or anyone is, making them be there that day.
Do you have an age limit on who can sign these consent forms?
Of course, they've got to be 18.
How do you monitor this intake of drugs and alcohol when you're doing these consent forms? I know you've mentioned that you do breathalyser checks.
Yes, yeah. So there's a breathalyser test and these, obviously, like I said, the consent forms. The standard of breathalyser test is the same standard of what the police use. So, like I said, as long as I'm abiding by the law, I don't know what anyone else wants me to do. Unless they literally want the government sat into the bedroom or they want the parliament to come and join me, which, they're welcome to. I don't know at what point we draw the line, because as long as I'm abiding by the law, do we start having cameras watching us 24/7 around what we're doing? Like, at what point, as long as, like I said, I'm going by the law, at what point do then we allow someone to have their own life? Like, should I have cameras on me 24/7? Like, government watching in the bedroom? So people need to decide what sort of independent world we want to live in.
Men have had a lot to say about the work that you do and what you're planning on doing at Schoolies. What do you say to men who feel you're over-sexualising barely legal teens and linking that with taking their virginity and masculinity in a harmful way?
Sex is not taking away anyone's masculinity at all. That's coming from someone that's insecure themselves. And it's their bodies and it's their decision. This content isn't for everyone, nor is it made for everyone. Everyone's got their own hobbies and things they enjoy. And just because perhaps those guys wouldn't enjoy that content or wouldn't like to get involved, doesn't mean their sons or their brothers wouldn't want to.
Speaking of the government, there have been calls for your visa to be banned or you to be deported. What is your response to that?
This petition, it's mainly sort of kicked off on TikTok. And it's the same people that are saying, oh, we need to get this girl banned because what she's doing is a criminal offence and she's a predator and she's sleeping with underage people. However, they're not underage. I'm not a predator. So they're signing something of false allegations. If the police had something wrong with it or if it was against the law, sign the petition. However, that is not the case. So they're signing it just because they don't like the content I make. However, if they was to spend 5 minutes looking on the hub, you'd see schoolgirl is the trending search. And they seem to have no problem with the fact schoolgirls can dress up and have done for Halloween for many, many years. And they don't seem to have no problem with that. Whereas I seem to have switched the roles. And, it's schoolboys as opposed to being a schoolgirl. And they've got a problem with that. So why haven't they got an issue with schoolgirls?
As you just said, we've often talked about the environment in the opposite, and it's a very normalised trope amongst older men engaging sex with younger women specifically because they are young.
Yeah.
When you use the terms barely legal and we see content like this is my first time on Pornhub and other platforms like that, do you think that you'd be getting the same level of criticism if you were a man doing this?
I think I'd get less, and which is probably strange to say because my comment section is filled with, if this was a guy, we'd be, there'd be an uproar. If this was a guy, we'd be giving him so much hate. However, I am getting, as you would have seen, endless amounts of hate and death threats. So it makes no difference if I was a guy because I'm getting hate. And I also get hate because people are saying, if she was a guy, she'd be getting hate. So they sort of continue to give me the hate as if I was a guy, even though I'm not. And then obviously give me hate for being a female myself. And like I said, it's confusing because this is coming from women which want equality and they want women's rights. So why haven't they got an issue with the schoolgirls? So they seem to pick and choose when they want to have an issue with women's rights and equality.
Part of the criticism surrounding consent specifically is that these men are too young, they're barely legal adults. They are able to sign a form, but they might not be able to fully understand the ramifications of their choices. That, if they do agree to be filmed, it'll be on the internet forever and they might want to withdraw consent at some point. Do you acknowledge that they might be able to withdraw their consent or that they might not fully understand what they're actually about to sign up to?
Yeah, they can withdraw consent, that's no problem. But in terms of them not understanding, it's a pathetic comment because we have said nowadays kids are glued to the phone. Oh my God, kids live on social media. They're always online. The younger generation have grew up on their phones. They understand social media more than me and you. So why are we then trying to pretend 18-year-olds don't understand a digital footprint and they don't understand social media? They have got better knowledge than me, especially their middle-aged parents. Because say if their mum was to go and buy a new phone or they had something wrong with their phone or something technical, I can guarantee you they'll be asking their sons or they're going to be asking, their kids for help on their phone. So it makes me laugh that then suddenly these parents that haven't grew up with social media and have very little understanding, and just like the mayor himself said, oh, I don't really understand OnlyFans, yet they decided to comment on it, even though he just acknowledged the fact he didn't understand it himself. So yeah, like I said, people like to pick and choose when we discriminate against 18-year-olds. We like to pretend they don't know what they're doing. Yeah, we're happy for them to sign up to the army and make their own decisions. But if they also use their own bodies and consent to sex, suddenly they're not allowed.
Returning to the calls to ban your visa, if you are deported, what would you do? Will you fight it if people want you to leave?
Well, I move into the US next year anyway, so I've got no problem. I'm literally coming for Schoolies, collecting my pets, and I'm off my way. So I've got no problem. I want to grow in the industry, and Australia is too, in the nicest way possible, just not the best place to do that for the industry I'm in. Too reserved, and yeah, it's got nice beaches, but that's as far as it goes.
How do you feel about the controversy? I know you mentioned there, like, you do want to grow your platform, you want to grow your name and your brand in a sense. Part of the job of being an adult content creator is getting lots of people to consume your content and sign up. Is this controversy actually good for you? And are you engaging with it on purpose?
100%. Every time there's an article, I share it on my platform. Anytime there's a hate comment, I use it to promote my next video. Like the current petition to get me cancelled is the promotion for my OF video. The more taboo they're making it sound, the more it boosts me. And the more people I've got commenting hate or, you know, especially the women saying, oh my God, this girl's content is so out there. It is pushing their husbands and their sons to be more intrigued and want to watch it. So anytime I see these TikTok videos and they've become obsessed with me or they're just trying to give me hate, it does nothing other than drive my money up and my bank balance is going through the roof. So honestly, it's more thanks to my subscribers, but thank you to the haters because you really are making me rich.
Speaking of the haters, what do you say to anyone listening that, you know, after everything we've discussed, that would still describe you as a predator? What would you say to them?
Google it. I'm not a predator. That's something that's not legal. Everything I'm doing is legal. So spend 5 minutes educating yourself. I can understand my content isn't for everyone. I can understand why you might not agree with it or you think I might not have morals. But what is wrong is sending me death threats and saying that, oh, what I'm doing, you know, is illegal. It's not. And people are saying, oh, I'm going to report you to the police. And in the second part of their sentence is saying, oh, hey, I can't wait to put you under the ground or I can't wait to come and stamp your head in. And I just think you need to start reflecting on the messages you're sending. If anyone's going to get reported to the police, it's you for sending a death threat. I enjoy the experience, so do they, and my content isn't made for the women, so I'm sorry it frustrates you, but at the same time, it's not for you, and nor are you the one that subscribes to the content. And if this uproar was coming from the people I'm sleeping with, and there's no secret that I sleep with a high amount of people, if they was coming forward saying, I didn't enjoy my experience, or actually I withdrew consent and she didn't follow through with that, then yes, I would be completely changing my attitude with the way I do things. But there's been hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people I've slept with, and I've not had one complaint yet. I've basically got 5 stars on TripAdvisor. So until that changes, then I'm still continuing.
Bonnie Blue, thanks so much for joining us on The Briefing.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
That was OnlyFans creator Bonnie Blue there. And if you want to hear the other side of the debate, we spoke with activist and survivor of sexual violence, Harrison James, to hear his take on what Bonnie Blue is doing.
So when OnlyFans creators like Bonnie Blue and Annie Knight specifically target, quote, barely legal boys, in environments like Schoolies, it exacerbates a pre-existing issue. It is a societal grooming of young men to equate any and all sexual encounters, even if it's exploitative, with status and validation.
That episode is in your feed right now, but thanks for listening to this episode of The Briefing. Before you go though, we'd love it if you could share this ep with someone else you think might be eager to hear part 1 and part 2, and let us know your feedback. If you want to keep up with our other content, you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast and on TikTok and YouTube. Just search for Listener Newsroom. I'm Helen Smith. Catch you next time.
Listener.